Hi, everyone. I hope everybody can hear me. This is Julie Albaugh from the Wedding Market. We are so excited to be bringing Wedding Market live today. We have Andrea Polito, who recently, this past July, won a $1 million lawsuit for a bride that falsely accused her. And we're going to hear her side of the story. So I hope that we can bring Andrea onto the stage along with me and get her side of the story of what happened. So, does everybody hear me okay? Hi, Andrea. Thanks so much for joining us.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
All right. Well, I am so glad that we are able to have this topic. I tell you, Andrea, I feel like this is such an important topic for business owners, whether it's wedding industry or what other business people might be in. Your online reputation is so important. And so I had so many questions from our audience in the sense of asking, when you met with this couple, when you met with this bride, what was your first meeting like? Was there any warning signs that this could be, an unusual situation?
Sure. No, actually, she came to me. She was a referral. There's been several other people that she had known that had used my services before. So it was just her. Her husband was not in the consult, and the consult was really good. It was just a normal consult. We talked, and she told me that she was a blogger, and we talked about. I remember making a joke about how, online presence and social media and Instagram and that sort of thing is almost a full-time job in itself. And so we had a conversation about her possibly helping me with my business because I was so focused on the business. It's hard to, be on social media as well. So the consult was great. It was in January of 2014, and she sent in the contract the next day.
Yeah. Now, as far as, when you got down to signing the contract with the couple, what was it like as far as actually, do you think they actually read the contract as far as that goes? Do you think that, I had so many people, they were wondering, did they actually read the contract?
I'm probably not, would be my guess. I don't know how many people actually really do read their contracts. They sign it, they send it in, they send in their deposit. I can tell you that when we were in depositions, and that question was asked to them, did you read your contract? Do you see what this contract says? They, then said, well, yeah, I read it now, but, I still don't agree with it. I feel like I should have my images when I want them, not, regardless of what the contract says. So it's hard to say whether, they read it beforehand before they, signed it and sent it in a year prior. But by the time, we were in depositions well into this lawsuit, they had said that, they had read it, but they didn't agree with it.
Okay. Now, I guess let's go to the next thing that happened. There was an issue with the contract, and then she went on television. Can you kind of tell us a little bit about the situation that happened between that so people can kind of get a feel of what actually happened in those short days?
Absolutely. Yeah, it's going to feel really good to say all this because, the headlines in this story, there's so many details to this story of what happened, and no one has begun to even, touch all the actual details. But basically, their wedding was in October of 2014. Everything prior to that was great. She loved her images, her engagement images. When they came in, or when she came in to, book the services, she booked my company photographers. In my business, I have, I'm on a different level, and then I had company photographers that would book out on a lower price range. And so everything went well. She, loved her images, and October was the wedding. We had our normal communication. The images were online within, I think, 4 or 5 weeks. We sent, the album form. Everything was great. And then about mid-December, they said, when do we get our images? And we had already sent them, previous emails. It was in their welcome packet, in the contract in bold. You don't receive your high resolution images until, your album is completed. It's just something that was a policy of mine. And I'm sure many creatives, photographers, especially, share that policy. Earlier on, you would give the images and then they disappear for 2 or 3 years, and 3 kids later and it moved to a different state, they decide they want to come back and fulfill their album. So that was just our policy to kind of move them along so we could, fulfill the album and close out the books on that particular wedding. So that's in December. We wrote them and said, you don't receive your high-res images again until your album's completed. Couple weeks went by. Again, we received an email in January, same thing. And again, we stated, you don't get your images. And then they said, okay, well, we're just now looking at the album form. We're going to fill it out now. Is there a fee for the cover? And we reminded her, all the paperwork, everything had been discussed. And this was on a Friday. Then there was the weekend. Monday, we're closed, like I'm sure many professionals are in the industry. And we were still emailing back and forth with them on some of the other questions. And later that evening, they went to the news stations. She tweeted, several different news stations saying, hey, I have a story for you. And come Wednesday, she was interviewed, and I didn't find any of this out until Wednesday, late afternoon, when I received a text from my studio manager. I was at my daughter's school picking her up from kindergarten, and she texted me a screenshot of this bride's Instagram where it said, "No big deal, NBC in my apartment." And it was Scott Gordon in their apartment. And I pretty much lost it at my daughter's school because I just had, it was completely unexpected and I had no idea. And that was a lot of the part of the lawsuit. It was the malicious intent part. They did this behind my back. They preferred the surprise. They didn't want anyone to know that they were doing this, or they didn't want me to know that they were doing this. So that's kind of how everything went down.
Okay. Well, it's interesting how they jumped the gun so soon. And I guess, it's just, I hate that happened, and, people are going to do, but as we had our conversation, you really felt that this issue was not about the contract, that it was about an issue of her so many minutes of fame,
Right. Well, she was a blogger and she didn't really have a big following, and, things come out as you move along with, when something gets spread, all over the internet. And apparently she had a history of doing things like this. There's a whole website dedicated to, kind of her online, of people that have had complaints about her before, her behavior. If she didn't get her way, she would, use her blog to try to call people out. So this wasn't something new for her. And I think that, she saw an opportunity and she took it. But in my situation, it was kind of like, I think I make a joke about this, but, the Bermuda Triangle, it was like the quadruple, mothership. No one was getting out of this no matter what, because you had a blogger, social media expert. Her husband is the IT security engineer of the Fed Bank of Dallas. So he has a master's degree in IT security engineering from, Southern Methodist University. And your tech clearance and your level is pretty high. And then you have a journalist who didn't really fact check and did a one-sided story. And I was out of town. So these four combination, the combination of these four things really, if it was just two of the four, I think things could have been different. But it was just, and this all transpired in 3 days. So it wasn't months, like some people had said online and that sort of thing. It happened in 3 days. I found out on Wednesday afternoon. The journalist had already interviewed them.
Right.
He had already, scheduled the interview with the wedding planner that was in the news story. And, I was the last person to find out. So they were going with this story no matter what on a Friday night at 10:30. So, it was a slow night for news, I think.
Okay. Now let's go into what happened to your social media and kind of prepare wedding professionals, what they might need to think about if this happens to them. So
Sure.
Can you share?
Sure. Well, the story aired, and again, like I said, I was out of town, and I received a message. Donnie Brown was the wedding planner in the story, and we had a conversation the day before it aired, and he didn't know it was about me. And he said if he had known, I mean, he never would have done the story. They didn't tell him who it was about, and we're in the same industry. We worked together for years, but he texted me and messaged me and said it wasn't that bad. It'll blow over. And then he texted me 5 minutes later and said, Andrea, you need to go to your Facebook page. It's blowing up with a bunch of haters. Try to turn off the reviews. So I dropped everything. I left dinner. I ran home, or not home. I was in Austin, and I got on my computer, and I couldn't delete reviews fast enough. I mean, it was so fast. And there were people that I had never heard of, worked with. I had 5-star reviews, 13 years of business, and just the internet army piled on. And a lot of them were their friends and, I think her blogging community, but my page blew up. And so I had to turn off all the reviews so no one could, make a review on Facebook. And little did I know, there was other things going on in the background, like Yelp was getting blasted, Wedding Wire, The Knot, all the review sites at, on Friday night at 10:30, 11 o'clock. So clearly, people aren't sitting at home just waiting for the news to air so they can just go write stuff about someone. This was obviously an attack, a planned attack on everything.
So the other thing that I would say is also that this happened wasn't it January, right around when the wedding booking season would take place?
Yes, that was the kicker of everything. The timing was unbelievable because I booked most of my business the first quarter. January and February were huge months for me. I usually booked about 50 weddings of the year, and my studio did around 100 weddings a year. So that's where we did all of our business, or booked half of it. And January 16th, the story aired, and there was maybe, I think we booked 2 weddings. So I think everyone was just in shock. This is not something, especially, every community has their own, tight knit community, but in Dallas, it's really tight. And I think, no one knew what to do. It was just like, do we just act like it didn't happen? Or, do we say something? And half the people thought, it was just nothing and everything went on as normal. And then, I think some of the wedding planners that I worked with, I was friends with some of them, but after the fact, it's not like they could really refer business because I was sort of radioactive. My name was kind of attached to this story. And, if they referred someone, they would be looking at me online and Googling my name, and this headline is attached to my name. So it really wasn't good for business.
So as far as what would be your advice if something like this happens to a wedding professional, if there's a social media storm happening, what should they do?
Sure.
What is, steps?
Right. Well, I think, I receive many, many emails daily from people who have a similar situation, or they say they have a similar situation. And, it's one thing to have a couple of reviews written about you that are not true, but to have an absolute, attack smear campaign on your business is different. And everyone wants to know, what can I do to prevent this from happening? And the truth is you can't control other people, and you cannot control what they do. And I think I've learned, so much through my journey with all of this. I think the main takeaway is just, it shows you how many people are unhappy. Happy people don't go around online spending their time writing nasty reviews and lying and spending time like this. They're happy. They're with their family. They're focusing on their business. And, that's the first thing. The second thing is, you have to plan ahead. With, tornadoes happen, hurricanes happen, you have a plan. If this sort of online smear campaign happens, you have to have a plan. You can't wait for it to happen, because by the time it does, then you're scrambling, trying to find resources and what should I do? And every second counts. So my biggest advice to anyone is, don't sit here and spend your time thinking or worrying, like, what am I going to do if it happens? Plan for it to happen. And then if it ever does, you're safe, or not safe. You can't, like I said, you can't protect yourself from this completely happening, but you can stop the damage faster if you have a step or a plan in place. And, I think so many people, can't afford to fight if there was something like this that happened to their business. So, saving is one of my biggest recommendations. Just like you have an insurance policy, a business insurance policy, and you have a savings account, you have to save for something like this to happen. Because if you don't have funds to hire an attorney or to get help with a PR firm or whatever it would be, that all costs money. So just saving, $50 a month if you can, just as a side, little egg to have in case, this happens. Do your research beforehand. Hire, go interview a couple of attorneys or PR firms in case this happens. You can pick up the phone, you know exactly who to call. Don't, you can spend days in trying to get referrals and interviewing people, but if you already have these, steps in place, you already have a big step forward in helping stop this. And I think, the other big takeaway I had from all of this is just as a creative, it's very easy for your identity to be wrapped up in your business. And so it's been a journey for me because, when my business was crushed, it felt like I kind of died myself, and I was hurt and I was miserable and I felt kind of worthless for a while. And I had to work on my inner strength and get that, right, because I put all my clients in my business first before me and my happiness. And I live for that awesome review and, people giving that made me feel good. But then if you got that one bad review, it would crush my day. And I think so many creatives are sensitive, and we just have to, focus internally and do the things that make you happy and realize you are not your business and your identity is not wrapped up in your business. And, I just encourage, creatives and entrepreneurs to have a good circle of influence. I was so busy with my business, I didn't have a huge network. I just, head down focusing on my work. And so when this happened, I felt really alone. And it's a very scary place to be, especially when you feel like the world is attacking you. So I encourage you to, elevate your circle of influence, be around, people that are constantly trying to work on themselves and be better humans and, better at their business, and, stay out of the gossip world and all of that. People, like I said, that are happy aren't in the gossip circles, and they're not the sort of people that are going online, spending their day, writing nasty reviews. I personally have never written one review online, not even a positive one. I mean, maybe I should, but it's just, I wish things would go back to the way that referrals used to work. And that's by word of mouth, because that's where truth happens. You have a conversation with someone and you can share your experience. But everyone that feels like they have to be a hero and go online and just, share their opinion, I don't understand that. It's, they feel like they're validated, or they feel like, they made a difference because they let somebody know, their personal experience with the business. I wish things would go back to where they used to be, where everything was just word of mouth.
Now, as far as your working with an attorney, how do you feel that your attorney helped you through this storm? What would you say to wedding pros, why it's important to get an attorney and how that helped?
Sure. Well, I knew I had a case, and a lot of people, when this attack happened on Friday night, I didn't actually speak out. The first time I spoke was on that Tuesday, the following Tuesday, where I wrote my open letter. And I simply just wrote on my blog and posted a link on Facebook and said, please read. And that ended up going viral. Within 2 days, I think over 1.5 million people had read that open letter. And, the reason why I was quiet is because I was documenting everything. I was seeing everything that was being said about me, especially from this couple, and the lies they were saying. And, I was in shock, but I knew, I needed to document all of this. So when I came to him, I had a case. It wasn't so-and-so said this bad thing about me and I'll go find where they said this one thing. I had, a 6-inch stack of documentation. And, my attorney was amazing. He's amazing at what he does, but he also has a heart. And ironically, there was 3 people in his law firm that had used me for their weddings, and they loved me and had amazing experience. And so, he knew that I had been wronged, and, he was amazing to be on my team. So and he came as a referral to me. So I called him on that Sunday and literally was meeting with him Monday morning. So, and mine, mine was over a weekend, but again, if you have a referral or you already have a couple of names in place just to have in your back pocket in case you are under attack, you can pick up the phone and call immediately instead of having to spend time and days and hours trying to find someone.
Now, as far as the actual legal fees, I mean, people probably are wondering, what would legal fees be for something like this? And while we're waiting for her to give us the response, I want our audience on also Facebook as well as in this webinar to also share their questions, and I will be asking Andrea your questions. But Andrea, what was your legal fees for something like this?
I won't say an exact number, but I will say they were well into the 6 figures. And the unfortunate thing is most attorneys don't take, cases on contingency, and mine was not on contingency. But luckily, I had saved for a rainy day, and this is something that, it wasn't easy to fight, and it cost a lot, but that's why I say if you can save along the way, if something like this does happen, you're prepared to fight instead of being cornered into acquiescing to, a demand or whatever it would be.
Well, let's go back to your thoughts on reviews. You were talking about, okay, you shut down the Facebook reviews. What would you suggest for the other review sites, that should be done, when all this is happening?
Sure. Well, to tell you the truth, I have a big problem with review sites such as The Knot and Wedding Wire. It irritates me to no end to know that, business owners advertise on these sites and they have a platform for anyone at any time to go on there and write whatever they want. And they have this dispute process where, they put the burden of proof on the business owner, the one that they're making money off of, to prove that this other person is not telling the truth. And my whole thing is, just because you have a contract with someone doesn't mean what they're actually saying is the truth. You could have a mother of the bride on there saying they were 3 hours late, they missed all these shots. And I mean, who is the Knot to say whether or not that happened? And, we all know how important review sites are. So it irritates me that they make it so difficult for the business owner, especially when, they're advertising. The second problem I have is, in my case, in particular, the groom, like as I mentioned before, was the IT security engineer for the Fed Bank. And the reason why I was able to show and prove kind of what happened was in discovery, he provided a screenshot of his laptop computer. And basically it was a screenshot that he had taken of my page when all the bad reviews were being, set on my page. But what he didn't realize is that he left all of his tabs open at the top of his screenshots. And so I had his computer, his picture in the bottom right-hand corner with the time, and all the tabs were open, and the tabs were Reddit, Wedding Wire, The Knot, NBC, my Facebook page. And, that's where all the reviews were written around the exact same time, where they had called me, cheater, scammer, con artist, all those things. So the proxy server, what that does is, and it had, a proxy server open where you could, go through a proxy server. And what the proxy server does is hide your IP address. So the Knot and the Wedding Wire and all of, the review sites online, they can track an IP address. So you can subpoena, an IP address from the Knot. They won't just hand it over. You have to, hire an attorney and then have them send over a subpoena to get the IP addresses. But if they're using a proxy server, they're being routed through China and Russia. And so you would never know in the first place who was even saying a review. And that makes me mad. Until they, start investing in software that can help, show this, or there was like a red flag or something like that. If that was the case on their end, they could see if reviews were being written. There's nothing to stop people from going through a proxy server and writing amazing reviews about themselves. So, I'm challenging them to, invest in whatever it is that I'm not an IT person, but there's something that you can do to track that sort of thing. And, as long as they're taking advertising dollars, it's $1 billion industry, the wedding industry. The more negative reviews, the more hits they get on their pages, the more money they make on their advertising. And again, it's like, as a small business owner, they're gambling kind of with your life, and you don't have a choice. You have to show up at the table, and the house always wins. So, you're kind of, anyone can write a review about you at any time, and it could be no one that no one that you've ever even worked with. And that frustrates me. So again, if anyone can do that, then there's nothing that's stopping you from, going through a proxy server and writing good stuff about you, which kind of, in my opinion, makes the whole review site worthless. I think, like I said, I'm really interested to see what's going to happen in the future. I believe that there's going to be probably some more lawsuits and class action lawsuits for review sites. The Texas appellate court ruled in my favor because, we filed the lawsuit. We went through the anti-SLAPP, which is a big thing in Texas, especially. It's basically gets you through the defamation process. And then we won that, and then they appealed it. Well, the Texas appellate court came back and ruled and said, not only, if you post something online that's defamatory, but if you republish it, that you can also be held liable. And so, what is a review site? It's basically republishing information that someone else said, and it's just hosting. It's an open platform. So I'm going to be very curious to see what happens to online review sites. But, for now, it's like we're all kind of sitting ducks. And I think, the burden of proof being on the business owner needs to switch to, the burden of proof needs to be on the Knot and the Wedding Wire and other review sites, where they need to, have a better policy in place. Instead of just giving a platform open to the world to write anything they want at any time.
Yeah, the question just came in. What wedding blog, content site, do you think is doing it right as far as, with the reviews? Do you know of any site that it's doing it right?
I believe, I've been doing research. I think the Yelp actually does have, things in place. No one is perfect. No site I don't think has everything right yet, but I believe Yelp does have software or some sort of a router tracer where, if someone's page is getting trashed from someone who's in California and they're talking about, a business in Rhode Island, I think that they automatically flag it before the business owner even sees it. So I think Yelp is on the right track. But I'm pretty sure I know that I heard that they're in a big lawsuit right now as well for some for defamation. And I think they're coming out with, there's some documentary about, Yelp, the $1 billion bully, I think I saw on Netflix, or it's in the works, about online defamation. But as of right now, I don't know of anyone that, is sitting there monitoring. Because if you think about it, there's millions and millions of people, and there's however many people that are working for these, sites. It's going to rely on software, I think, because they can't have everyone managing all these pages with all the businesses listed. So it's going to come down to investing in the right software and being able to track, IP addresses and knowing whether they're coming in, if it's a business in the same area, if it's someone coming in from Russia, they're going to know that, that it could be a potential fake review. So I don't know of any at this time, but like I said, I think Yelp is on the right track, or the closest to being on the right track.
Now, as far as the next question I had here from, did your attorney at first discourage you or tell you that perhaps this was going to be a tough case to win? I mean, I don't know if the wedding industry really understands how important your case is, not only to the wedding industry, for business owners.
Yes. He did say there's a risk with any, any lawsuit, but defamation is especially is really hard to win and prove. But I sued them on 5 different counts. It wasn't just defamation. It was libel. It was slander, because it was both written on the news, and then the news republished it, written and said. And then I also sued them for civil conspiracy, because they were a husband and wife working together, and then for malicious intent, and that's the evilness behind everything, and then tortious interference, because when all this happened and before, they were contacting current clients as well. So I had a pretty strong case because I had so much documentation. Just going, if you have one bad review written, it's not worth a lawsuit. But we had, we had a strong case, and there was a lot of, the thing is, your attorney can be good, but he's only as good as you can, you have to provide a case for him. So if I just came to him and said, I have this case, he wouldn't have been able to go online and find all of this stuff. I had all the documentation I needed, and I gave that to him. And, I did all the research, and I watched, what was going on. So you have to be, you have to have your ducks in a row on your end. But yeah, I mean, that was definitely a risk. And the cost too is it's extremely expensive to fight a lawsuit, not to mention the emotional toll it can take, and the stress. So, but I felt like mine was, someone needed to do something about this sort of thing. And, I felt like for whatever reason, I had to do this. Something inside me just told me I needed to do this, not only for myself, but for all business owners. So hopefully it makes a difference in some small way or big way. I'll take that too.
Now, how has this changed your life? How is this?
Yeah, that's a good question. Like I said, when this all happened, I was devastated. I didn't want to leave my house. I didn't for almost 3 weeks. In Dallas, my community, I've been here since school, but my business for 13 years. And I've photographed, several, over 600 weddings. And a lot of the families at my daughter's school, their children go to school now, and I photographed their weddings. So for me, I was so ashamed of the story. And shame just makes you feel awful. It's not oh, I'm sorry this happened. It's, I'm so sorry. Like, it's the worst feeling. And everyone knows me in my area, and I didn't want to go out of my house. I literally did. I paid cash for things for the first 3 weeks. I didn't want to show a credit card. I was that humiliated. And a lot of that could be perception too on my side of things. But, I was so ashamed of the story. So I was at dinner one night with a friend about 6 months after this had happened. And I was in the middle of my lawsuit, and I kept saying, there's a silver lining in all of this. I just need to figure out what it is. And my friend looked at me right in the eyes, and he said the wrong question. He said, don't look for this to understand is, why did this story bring you to your knees at your daughter's school when you found out this happened? And I was just like, wow. So it kind of took me on a little self-discovery road. And I really realized that, my identity was so wrapped up in my business, and I couldn't separate the two. I was my business, and my business was me. And I lived for, this 5-star review, business pleasing my, and got into this whole, habit of perfecting. And I had lost me in the whole process. And so when this happened, I said, I literally died, and I had to kind of find my way back and realize that there's a whole, other side to having a business and being an entrepreneur. And I had my own identity and my own happiness. And so, as a person, I am stronger than ever. I'm the happiest I've ever been. I've, was forced kind of, I feel like, into this kicking and screaming. I hate the spotlight. I would have never done this interview 2 years ago. But, I've grown as a person. I've been able to come out of my shell a little bit. And, I feel like I have a message now that I can share with the world, and I'm proud of it. I really am. It's not everyone can go through something like this and still be standing here. And there were many days when I didn't want to, I just wanted to be done. I just couldn't handle it. But, I knew that there was a bigger purpose for all of this. Something like this doesn't just happen, for no reason. And I consider myself a pretty tough person, but going through all of this, you have to have some pretty thick skin. But it has made me a better person. And like I said, I've elevated my circle of influence. I've taken time for myself, because if you aren't good internally for you, you can't be good for your business and your clients. And, something like this can destroy you. So, I encourage everyone to just, look at themselves and remember, when you're at home and you get that text or that inquiry or whatever it may be present with your family, be present with your children, take time out for yourself, because, you are not your business and your business is not you. It's a big part of that, but it doesn't define who you are. And, I had made that mistake. So I can now happily say that we are definitely two different things.
Very good advice. Very good advice. Now, I guess what I would ask at this point, now you got a new book that is coming out. Now, can you tell us a little bit about that and what you'll be sharing?
Sure. Well, I'm not sure. I have one of my books I just actually released is for photographers, and that's the 8 steps to 800,000. And that's basically, a business book for photographers. When all of this happened, it made me look really hard and realize that, I actually before this suit even happened, I had been working on a coaching platform, and then the story aired, and then it kind of not only ruined my name sort of in the wedding industry or the bridal, but put my name, in the world of photographers. So I kind of hunkered down and just kept writing my courses. So I just released a course, Your Passion to Profit, and that's for photographers. And then I have another book that I'm working on currently, and that's basically about business bullies and how you can protect yourself, from something like this happening. So hopefully that's a couple of months, if everything goes well.
So the next question that came from our audience, now that you've got your book and so forth, they were wondering, do you think you will collect on, or have you collected on your settlement?
Yeah, I wish it was that quick and that easy. Basically, what happens is they can still try to appeal it. They have, I think so the jury, the way it works is the jury, has had their verdict. And they didn't actually even show up for the verdict. Sorry, I just have to say that, because it's just one of those things where, you work 2.5 years for something and the jury comes in and their attorneys are there, but they didn't even show up for the reading of the verdict. And then, so basically after that happens, the judgment has to get entered into the court. And then once that happens, they have 30 days to appeal it. And so, they can still try to appeal. I can't imagine them wanting to do that, because basically to appeal in Texas, you have to put up 20% of the actual judgment total. And it's also collecting compounded interest. So, it'll be, collecting, I think, close to $60,000 of interest a year that every day it's not paid. So it's a big, decision whether they appeal it or not. But the Texas appellate court already ruled in my favor even before the jury trial. So, I can't imagine them doing it, but they can still appeal. So no, I have not collected on the judgment yet.
So where can they purchase your book? Where could they go to purchase your book?
They can go to andreapolito.com. Has my coaching platform. It has a free 7-day boot camp that you can take. And then the book, there's a book link also on there. And it's a great book. It's not, it's not about posing and actions and editing. It is a business book for photographers on how to scale your business. And, I used all of these strategies in my business over the years, and, thought it just kind of came second nature to me. But I was like really thinking about it. And, a lot of photographers don't know how to actually run the business side. It's the creative side, which is amazing. But, the business side is really on how to increase that revenue, the bottom line, growing your business and scaling your business, hiring employees and that sort of thing. By the, my peak, I had I think 12 company photographers shooting for me. I had 3 full-time, employees for the company. And then I was shooting and doing my business as well. So, that my peak years, my studio was grossing over $800,000 a year, which is, not really heard of, especially from the business. And that was not, that was just shooting. That wasn't doing coaching or anything like that. So I, decided I wanted to help photographers learn and grow their business. So that's kind of what I'm doing now. So all that information is on andreapolito.com, and, email me or contact me if you have any questions. I'd love to talk to you.
Now, as far as what would you have as far as closing thoughts? What would you want the wedding industry to take from what happened to you? From, what do they need to do?
Well, I think if you take anything away from this, I don't want to use the scare tactic, but, you are not safe from this. We're all just sitting ducks. And so you have to plan to protect yourself if something like this happens. And I always like to use the, idea of the snake bite. If you get bitten by a snake and you're running around looking for a tourniquet and it's taking forever to find it, you're going to be dead. If you already have one in place, you can stop, the damage way faster than you can without one. And so, I think it's really good to get a plan in place to save money for something like this happening. Go ahead and do your research on who you would contact in case this did happen. Have your past clients rally behind you and talk to everyone has those raving fans, and find them and have a conversation with them and say, if this ever happened, I would love to choose you to help rally behind me. In exchange, offer them something. I'll offer you, a family portrait session on a yearly, whatever it would be, but just to know that you're serious about it. And to have that sort of insurance policy kind of in your back pocket is priceless. Because if something like this happens, you don't want to be running around trying to figure out what you're going to do. Meanwhile, your name is getting blasted every second. So that's my biggest, advice is just don't think it can't happen to you, and plan for it, and just have a plan in place for peace of mind.
Well, I think that is all we have for now. But Andrea, I so appreciate you coming on today and telling your story and sharing how important it is for the wedding industry to know that this could happen to anyone. We applaud you for taking and being the lead to share with, people that you can't just have freedom of speech, that if what you say is not truthful, you will pay for what you say. And I think we thank you for doing that for us. We really appreciate that.
I should say my attorney, I think he said it best when, he said freedom of speech is not freedom from consequence. So yeah, you have the right to go say whatever you want to say, but if it's defamatory and you're lying, there's going to be consequences. So I think it's a great quote. Freedom of speech is not freedom from consequence.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you for the audience. Please, Andrea, if people still have questions, they can put them, I think, after we close this out on Facebook Live, and Andrea can also look at those later. But thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you next time on Wedding Market Live.
Thank you.
Have a great day.